Hi guys, David O'Sullivan here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you the second instalment in my ongoing series of my favourite films of all time. I've already done the first instalment in this series on Blade Runner a couple of months ago, and I did that to mark the release of the 35th anniversary of Blade Runner, so if you haven't seen that video and you want to check it out, be sure to go and check that video out. But in this video I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on another one of my absolute favourite films of all time, and it is of course Bambi. And you may think, wow, that's quite, two quite different films from Blade Runner to Bambi. But yeah, I love both these films. I put them both probably in my top 5 favourite films of all time. I'm slowly going to work through, top 5, top 10. I'm not ranking these in any kind of order. That's why I just had to do them as, separate reviews, so to speak, in individual videos. I'm not kind of pushing them into a list. I'm not ranking them in any kind of order because I love all of them. They're all my favourite films, and I've done the video on Blade Runner, and now I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to give you my thoughts on Bambi. Why? Because the film was recently just celebrated its 75th anniversary. That's right, the film came out 75 years ago, back in 1942 I believe, and seeing as the film recently just celebrated that anniversary, I thought now would be the perfect opportunity to give you my thoughts on the film. So let's just talk about it. I first have to start off by saying that this is one of my absolute favourite films from my childhood. I grew up with this film. I loved it as a kid, and I've loved it ever since I first saw it. And this film holds a very special place in my heart because it's not only, I think, the very first Disney film I ever saw, aside from maybe Snow White, it's probably also one of the very first films I ever saw. There's 3 films I can remember which were kind of 3 of the very first films I think I ever saw, and it was Wizard of Oz, Mary Poppins and Bambi. So Bambi is definitely right up there. It may have even been the first film I ever saw, and so it holds a really special place in my heart because of that, and also because it is absolutely unequivocally my favourite Disney movie of all time. I know it's not the popular opinion. A lot of people say, Beauty and the Beast or Lion King or Aladdin, some of these other more kind of recent, more popular modern films, but I just absolutely love Bambi. I have such a soft spot for the film, and the reason why I think Bambi is the best, because even though there's some other really great Disney films, for me Bambi, it just stands out so much from all the other films. It's not only a great Disney film, it's just a great film in general, and it's 75 years old now and it still holds up. And one of the best things about this film for me is that it's so imminently rewatchable. I recently rewatched the film a year or so ago, and that was the first time I'd seen the film in quite some time, and I was worried that I wouldn't love it as much as I remembered loving it as a kid, because a lot of times you watch a film as a kid and you love it, and then years later you go back and revisit it and you're like, oh, that wasn't as good as I remember. And I was worried that would be the case with Bambi, because as much as I love, say, The Jungle Book and Robin Hood, that are 2 of my other favourite Disney movies of all time, they don't necessarily hold up as well as some of the other great Disney films. I remember when I went back and rewatched The Jungle Book and Robin Hood, I still love them. I still think they're really great, but they're not as good as I remember them being as a kid. But with Bambi, it was the complete opposite. I remember when I revisited it the other year for the first time in quite a while, I was so shocked at how well it still held up all those years later since I saw it. And that for me is one of the best qualities about Bambi, is that it's so rewatchable, and it was really stood the test of time so well. Like, you wouldn't have thought it was one of their earliest films. It was only their 5th film, but every time I go back and rewatch it, I'm just awestruck at how great a film it is and how well it still holds up all these years later. It really has stood the test of time. It is a real timeless classic. Now, getting into more of my thoughts on the actual film itself, I think one of the best things about this film is that it's told entirely from the deer's point of view, and that doesn't sound like a massive thing, but when you really think about it, it's really quite extraordinary how they approach telling this story, because a big part of this film is man and the fear of man, and they're closing in, they're taking over the forest, they're causing kind of destruction and fire and death and ruin. And you feel so much dread and you feel so much terror on behalf of the deers because you're seeing it from their point of view. It's so remarkable that the film is able to convey so much horror and so much tension, despite the fact you never see a man. This is something I never really picked up on that much as a kid. I never really took note of that much. I never really kind of crossed my mind. I didn't really think twice about it. But years later when I rewatched it, what struck me was that you feel so much horror on behalf of these deers. It's so much tension and terror is put across, despite the fact you never see any human characters. Yet you feel so scared for the deers and you feel so much horror, but you never see anyone. And it's truly remarkable how the film is able to do that. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't give this movie credit for, because obviously in every other Disney movie you see the villains. In this, the villains are essentially man, but you never see them. And I never really picked up on that as a kid, like I said, but when I rewatched it, I realised you don't see anything. Not a silhouette, not like just a brief glimpse, not even a gun. You don't see anything, and it's just so remarkable how the film is able to put across so much tension and so much horror in those sequences. Because you're seeing it from the deer's point of view, you are a deer in those sequences, and it is truly terrifying because you can't see the humans just like the deers can't, and you're like, oh my god, what's happening, what's going on, and you feel so scared because it feels like you're there in that situation with those animals. Like you're so like disorientated and scared and know what's going on. There's some genuinely really quite frightening, scary, powerful, impactful scenes in this film that really worked for me as a kid and still work for me now. I mean, a lot of people say that this film is quite frightening, quite traumatic, and I suppose it is. There's some things that happen with the death of Bambi's mother, for instance, but it never really scared me that much as a kid. I mean, I was probably more scared of like Snow White, for example, with the evil queen and that. With Bambi, I was never really scared by it. It just always really resonated with me on a deeper kind of emotional level, and it still does. I can really appreciate how great of a film it is, and like I said, the whole kind of telling the film from the deer's perspective is a massive part of what makes this film work so well. And I've also got to talk about how atmospheric this film is. I kind of touched upon this already, but it really kind of creates such a kind of tangible, palpable atmosphere when you're watching this film. Like, it feels like you're there, and it feels so just riveting and so just real and raw and powerful and emotional when you're watching this film. At least it does for me anyway, and I just think it still works so incredibly well. And just everything about it, just the visuals, the music, just it all comes together to make such a great experience when you're watching this film. It really feels like an experience. It really feels like you're there and you're witnessing these things with the deers essentially. It is absolutely fantastic. And like I said, the music also plays a real big part in this, because it's not an overly musical Disney film. A lot of the other Disney films are musicals, and I love those films. I'm a big fan of musicals, but the thing about Bambi is, aside from maybe April Showers, there's no songs in this film. It's not really a musical at all, but the music still plays a really pivotal and important part in this film, getting so much of those emotions from you and conveying so much of that through the music and what the music adds to this film. Just the musical score is just so great and so atmospheric. Like when you're watching these scenes, especially the scenes when like humans are approaching and something bad is going to happen, like that music just creeps in. It just increases, it just ratchets up the tension, it just gets scarier and scarier and more tense, because you just know something bad's going to happen. You get that sense of impending doom as the music just creeps in there, and it just adds so much tension and makes it just so much more atmospheric and so much more just riveting and engaging to watch, because it just adds so much to those scenes. And of course, I've got to talk about how emotional this film is. It is really one of the most powerful and just raw and emotional films for me. Like, this is so much about this film that just really resonates with me. And it's kind of odd because it's a film about animals, but I was always able to really connect with the film. I was always able to really kind of relate to the main characters, and it always really resonated with me on a deeper kind of emotional level. And I always love the Disney movies about animals, as well as the Jungle Book so much, and actually Robin Hood as well, because they're all portrayed as animals. But I love the Disney movies that are about animals, and Bambi I think is by far the best. You're immersed in that environment with these characters, and it's entirely from their perspective, and you're with them every step of the way on this journey. And like I said, it just hits me so much. There's just the story of Bambi, and he goes from this young fawn just discovering this place in the world, his interactions with just Thumper, the rabbit, and Flower, the skunk. It's just everything about all that aspect of the film I absolutely love. It's just so delightful, so magical, so funny. It's really quite remarkable that it can be so fun and light-hearted and entertaining, but also so quite dark and dramatic and powerful and emotional. It can do both of those things so incredibly well, and it never feels like a mishmash in tone, because it's light-hearted and funny and happy and optimistic when it needs to be, and it's also very dark and intense and powerful powerful and dramatic when it needs to be as well. Some of my favourite scenes fall into that category. As much as I love all the fun, light-hearted, comedic moments between Bambi and his friends frolicking around in the forest, and I love all of that stuff, some of the really powerful moments just really resonate with me and really hit me. Like, I love that scene when Bambi first enters into the meadow and we see all the other deers there, and it's just so operatic and majestic, and we see the deers just leaping off that stone cliff, and just the music there. And then when Bambi first sees the great prince of the forest, who's his father, who he's never met before, and just the music and just how, you know, the great prince just comes out just walking slowly, and all the other deers just stop and just look at him. It's so great. And that's another thing I almost forgot, but this film, what's so remarkable about this film, and I kind of touched upon it already with the kind of the hunters and how we never really see them, but it's the use of visual storytelling. Because obviously there's dialogue, and I love all the dialogue exchanges between the characters, but this film is such a great example, perhaps more so than any other Disney film, of really amazing visual storytelling. There's so many fantastic scenes in this film where there's no dialogue, it's just the visuals accompanied by the music, and it's just, we get so many striking kind of visual images in this film, and just the way they're put across, you know, how it's, you know, filmed, so to speak, you know, it's an animated film, but just the cinematography, just the composition of the shots, how it's cut together, accompanied with the fantastic music. The music can be so atmospheric and moving, and when it needs to be, it can be so much majestic and powerful when it needs to be as well, almost choir-like, with those chorus-like songs with the singing there. There's just so much about this film that I absolutely love. I can go on and on and on about it, but overall, for me, Bambi is hands down the best Disney movie of all time, and I think it will probably always will be in my heart, because it holds a very special place to me. It's one of the very first films I ever saw, a massively important film of my childhood, and a very kind of influential film to me. I absolutely love this film, and I think I always will love it. It really resonates with me on a deeper emotional level. I can really connect with the film, and I can really relate to the characters, and for me it's just an absolutely fantastic film, the best Disney film without a doubt for me. I mean, there's a lot of other really great Disney movies, but for me this is my favourite. I think it is the best. It came out 75 years ago, but for me it still holds up. It's a real timeless classic. All these years later you can go back and watch it. Came out 1942, beautiful hand-drawn animation, and it still works, it still resonates, it's still, for me, I think one of the most timeless Disney movies, and will always will be, just because of the nature of the story and the characters and everything about this film. I think it will be really just timeless in that respect. It really just, I don't think, will ever age. So there we go, there's my thoughts on Bambi. What do you think about the film? Have you seen it? Is it one of your favourite Disney films, or what is your favourite Disney film of all time? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to see more. Also, if you missed my last film review, be sure to go ahead and click over here to catch up on my last film review, or perhaps down here to catch up on another one of my recent videos. But for now, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.